A long time ago, in the village of Achi, there was a princess named Ego who was the first daughter of King Cheta. Unlike her three younger sisters, Ego was unmarried because of her body size. She was not getting any suitors because she was extremely fat. Some villagers began to sing songs to mock her behind her back, and the issue of her weight was always on the lips of gossips. Some of them would say, I heard that they tie three wrappers so it can go round her waist. Others would say, did you hear that she finished one whole goat in a day? King Cheta and his wife were troubled about their daughter's weight. Several times, they tried to set up arranged marriages for her, but nobody was interested. Ego, on the other hand, had given up on herself because she was so addicted to food that she could not imagine becoming slim in her lifetime. And she believed marriage would probably not be an option for her because any man that agreed to marry her would be doing it for her status and not because he loved her. And Ego had always desired to be loved by whoever she married. Although she was generally unhappy with her life, she was able to find a bit of happiness from dancing. The princess was a fantastic dancer. Oftentimes, she would hide in her hut and begin to dance to the beat she made from her mouth. Whenever there were festivals, Ego would look for a lonely spot, close enough to hear the music and dance to her heart's content. She was always hiding because she did not want anyone to mock her. Well, it was the end of another successful year, and it was time for the annual festival between the four neighboring villages. And as usual, everyone was vibrating with excitement. Some people could not wait to showcase their best dresses. Some polished their dancing steps and practiced endlessly with their musical instruments, while others could not wait to enjoy the variety of meals that would be served on that day. Ego, on the other hand, was only interested in finding a lonely spot that would give her the freedom to express her dancing steps. Finally, she found a spot where she could hear the drums and flutes clearly. Then she began to dance with a wide grin on her face. However, she soon noticed the sound of a drum becoming louder and louder, but she ignored it because she was engrossed in her dancing. Suddenly, the festival music stopped, but the sound of the drum continued. She immediately turned her back and saw a man playing the drum with a huge smile on his face. The man stopped playing and asked, why did you stop dancing? Ego immediately began running, and the man followed her. But because she was too heavy to run fast, he caught up with her. Leave me alone, she said, panting. Go and look for your comedic relief somewhere else. The man looked at her kindly, wondering why she thought she was a joke to him. I got lost trying to get to the market square, and I was trying to find my way when I saw you dancing over there. So I decided to support you with my drums, he said. Ego took a better look at the color of his attire and realized that he wasn't from her community. She thanked the man for drumming for her, then directed him to the market square. But the man insisted that he would rather continue to play for her, and without Ego's approval, he began to drum again, urging her to dance. When Ego saw that he was not going to give up, she began making small hip movements to the tune of his beats. After all, what did she have to lose? He was a stranger who she would never meet again, and she had the opportunity to dance like she always wanted. After a long while, Ego stopped dancing. "Thank you, Mr. Drummer. I really enjoyed myself," she said to him. "My name is Arinze, not Mr. Drummer," he answered. Ego told him her name, then said she had to return home. But Arinze pleaded with her to come back the next day, and Ego agreed. On her way home, she thought about the man, wondering why he was so nice to her, and even wanted to spend more time with her. "Of course he's not attracted to me," she thought to herself. To Ego's understanding, it was unusual for such a handsome man to like her. All night, she couldn't stop thinking about him, but she tried her best to not get too excited. In the evening of the following day, Ego set out to meet her new friend Arinze. When Arinze set his eyes on her, he was so excited, and Ego was excited to see him too. They talked for a long time and got to know each other, and afterwards, he drummed for Ego to dance. Days turned into weeks, and they kept on meeting each other at their spots, and to both of them, it was always the best time of their day. Finally, Arinze told Ego how he felt about her. Although Ego suspected he liked her, she did not want to jump into any conclusions. But she was happy when he finally voiced it out, because she felt the same way too. "I can come with my people in the next market day to see your parents," he said. So, the ball was set rolling. Ego quickly informed her parents that a man from the next village would come and see them to ask for her hand in marriage. The king and queen were very happy. They never knew a day like this would come. But unfortunately, calamity soon struck. A week before the arranged meeting, an airborne disease spread round the entire 4 villages and its surroundings. To prevent people from spreading the disease, each village closed their border, and their rulers also instructed them to stay indoors. Ego was very sad that her future husband would not be able to see her every day as usual. To make matters worse, some days after the borders were closed, Ego contracted the airborne disease, and for more than 3 months, she struggled to stay alive. The illness greatly affected her appetite, making it very difficult for her to finish half a plate of food in a day. As the months went by, a herbalist found a cure, and people gradually began to feel better. When Ego fully recovered, the first thing she discovered was her massive weight loss. She could not believe it. She was almost as small as her 3 sisters. It was a dream come true. That wasn't the only thing that changed. Her face had also become more defined, and her beauty was evident for even the blind to see. She realized that wherever she went, she was stared at in admiration by men who never glanced a second look at her in the past. And the wealthy men amongst them also began to approach her for conversations about marriage. Ego began to feel on top of the world, and all of a sudden, she felt too good for Arinze. When the borders were finally open, Ego went to her and Arinze's spot to wait for him, because she knew he would definitely be there waiting. When Arinze set his eyes on her, he almost did not recognize her. "Wow, my princess, I missed your beautiful smile," he said. Ego gave him the cold shoulder. She felt too mighty to be in his presence. Arinze thought she was only acting up because she had missed him so much. So he began to play the drum for her to dance. But she shouted at him, ordering him to stop the noise. "Mr. Drummer, I am not interested in whatever you are playing. I only came here to tell you that I am not interested in marrying you anymore." Arinze was alarmed at her change in behavior. I know you have never been with a princess before. That is why you are always smiling like a goat. She stormed out of the place, warning him never to reach out to her, as they did not belong to the same caliber. Weeks passed, and Arinze kept sending messengers to Ego so she could have a change of heart, but she ignored all of them. Instead, she was entertaining the long line of men who were interested in marrying her. One day, she came up with an idea. Ego decided to host a wrestling competition for the eligible bachelors in the village, and anyone who emerged the winner would be crowned as her suitor. The competition was set, and it went beyond the borders of her village. A lot of men signed up to win the heart of Ego, the first daughter of the great King Cheta. The king even invited royalties and affluent people for the event. Ego decided to stay indoors for the next 4 months to receive the best beauty treatment to wow her suitors. But she failed to recognize that it was the illness that made her slimmer. Her old eating habits remained the same. So while Ego was indoors, she kept eating her large portions, and day by day, the weight began to pile on again. When the 4 months had elapsed, Ego had returned to her previous size. She was disappointed in herself and tried her best to cancel the event, but her father refused. "I'm sure you will find a suitor regardless of your present situation," he said to her. On the day of the event, warriors, farmers, traders, and many eligible bachelors made their way to the village square, preparing to win the heart of Ego. But when Ego was called out to greet her visitors, the men stared at her in shock. She wasn't what they had bargained for, and one by one, they began to walk away, making their way home. Ego had never been so embarrassed. When she was about to leave the place in shame, her eyes caught a familiar figure. It was Arinze. But it wasn't the Arinze she was familiar with. He was dressed like royalty, very different from the basic material he wore to their meetings. They looked at each other for a while, and a voice soon interrupted their gaze. "My prince, your father is ready to leave now." Just like Ego, Arinze was royalty. His father was the king of one of the 4 villages, but because of his love for music, he would usually disguise to play with everyone during the festivities because he did not want to be treated specially by the other villages. As Ego watched Arinze turn his back and begin to walk away, she realized that she had lost a good man who loved her regardless. It is such a pity because she never got the opportunity to find love again. And eventually, she had to settle to be the 10th wife of an old chief. The moral lesson of this story is that you should never neglect those who were there for you when you were at your worst. Because this type of people are getting quite rare these days. And if you treat them unfairly, you might never get the opportunity to be in their lives anymore. Thank you for watching this story today. Please comment on what you learned, and do not forget to like and share with your loved ones.
A long time ago, a Yoruba kingdom in western Nigeria had a princess called Adishu. She was the second daughter of the king and the queen. She was not considered to be as pretty or as attractive as her 4 sisters and other princesses in general. Her figure was also something that drew attention to her in a bad way. She was fat, and some even described her to be as round as a ball. She lacked all the features that people of their time considered to be signs of beauty. When she went out with her friends or sisters, men and princes hardly ever paid her any attention, not even out of sympathy. But they always showered her friends and sisters with all the attention and praise. To make matters worse, Adishu often overheard her parents, relatives, and visitors describe her with heartbreaking words like the fat one, the black one. Sometimes, in discussions, she'd hear something like, "Oh, we weren't talking about that one. We were talking about the pretty one." Once, she even heard someone refer to her as the ugly one. As a princess, her parents, the king and queen, ensured that she and her sisters had the finest education, especially because the king and the queen didn't have a male heir. Because Adishu felt she was not attractive, she decided to throw herself completely into studies at an early age. She felt since she wasn't getting any attention because of her looks, she could get attention and acceptance for being brilliant. And in time, she succeeded. She became one of the most brilliant young royals, and news of her accomplishments spread far and wide. But sadly, Adishu had already grown up with the consciousness that she wasn't deserving of any form of attention because she wasn't pretty or attractive. This affected her self-esteem, and it showed in how she carried herself and her expectations from life, especially in the area of relationships. While other princesses openly discussed their desires to marry handsome princes, Adishu never participated in such conversations because she believed that men of that caliber would never be attracted to her. People came to respect Adishu for her knowledge and brilliance, but she still didn't get advances from men or romantic interests. One day, a festival was to be held in their kingdom. It was a big event. Everyone from their kingdom and even royals from other kingdoms were going to be in attendance. But the king was so sick that he would not be able to participate. So instead of his wife the queen or any of the other chiefs, the king asked Adishu to address the people on his behalf because he trusted her deep knowledge of their culture, her emotional intelligence, her brilliance, and her ability to lead, all of which she had learned through her diligence in study. Adishu was excited. She was finally being noticed and appreciated for something. Adishu spent 3 days working on her speech, giving it all her attention and skill. The day of the festival came, and Adishu sat on the king's throne. It caused whispers and tongue-wagging among the crowds. Visitors and people who had never seen her before asked, "Who is that woman wearing royal attire and sitting on the king's throne? I think she's the king's wife because all that fat must have been caused by childbirth." Some said. And others said that even though she was wearing royal clothes, she couldn't possibly be a princess, as princesses were always perfect and pretty. All the murmurings were soon cut short by the loud and intricate rhythm of the talking drums that were played to announce her readiness to address the gathering. The work she put in her speech was obvious from her delivery. She made sure she captured the essence and symbolism of the festival, the beauty of the people, and the significance of their gathering. Every word and the manner in which she said it spoke to the heart of the people. She spoke for an hour, and she left everyone spellbound. No one wanted her to finish because they were marveled by how much wisdom and knowledge she had gathered at such a young age. Even the members of the king's court were struck with awe. She delivered with so much grace, poise, and love for the people that it mesmerized everyone in attendance. When she was done, the whole place went so silent that you could hear a pin drop. Adishua feared for a moment that she had done badly and almost began to shake from within. Oh my God, I must have embarrassed father. Why are they all looking at me so quietly? But from nowhere the crowd erupted into a loud cheer, thunderous clapping and great rejoicing. The whole kingdom was proud to have such a brilliant princess. Many even suggested that she was fit to be a queen and even rule a kingdom. While the people continued their festivities in high spirits, the royals socialized with one another. Many congratulated Adishua and praised her for her brilliance. They wined and dined through the evening, and as the night progressed, it was time for everyone to dismiss. Adishua was making her way to the king's quarters when she felt a cold hand grab her wrist from behind. "Excuse me, Princess Adishua," the voice came from behind her. She was startled and turned to see what or who had grabbed her wrist. She saw a face she had never seen before. A dark, handsome young prince whose radiance set him apart from everyone she had seen that evening. He was adorned in regal attire that bore the symbols of his royal lineage. His presence was both regal and approachable. Adishua gazed at him, and her heart began to beat faster. He carried himself with so much grace that reminded her of the flowing rivers that traversed their kingdom, and for that moment, he had her rapt attention. As she looked into his eyes, she sensed a perfect blend of intelligence and warmth. As they both locked eyes with each other, Adishua felt a spark of connection like what she had never felt before. But she quickly snapped out of it and looked at him with a stern face. "Yes, how can I be of assistance to you?" she answered. He smiled and said, "I am Prince Tunde from Ife. I've been trying to get your attention all day without any luck." "Oh, I'm sorry. Is anything the matter? If you need to see the king..." Before she could conclude that sentence, Tunde politely cut her off by saying, "Oh, it's nothing of that sort. I was deeply moved by your speech today and wanted to meet you to appreciate you in person. I have long heard tales of beauty and grace, but nothing could have prepared me for the radiance I experienced today. May I have the honor of speaking with you just for a moment?" Adishua couldn't believe what she had heard. She glanced behind her to confirm he was indeed addressing her and not someone else. She even pinched herself to ensure she wasn't dreaming, and she stylishly looked down at her wrist to confirm if she had magically become slim and attractive all of a sudden. Adishua was lost in her thoughts and didn't realize that she had left the prince's question unanswered. "I apologize if I have said anything wrong, Princess Adishua," Tunde commented. "Oh no, you haven't. Can we sit in the garden? It's been a really long day." And so, they sat and got to know each other more. They thoroughly enjoyed their conversation and each other's company. What began as a few minutes quickly transformed into a few hours, marking the start of their beautiful courtship filled with meaning, love, and heartfelt conversations. After a while, talks were going about Tunde bringing his people to officially ask for Adishua's hand in marriage. One afternoon, Tunde came to visit Adishua, and as usual, they sat in the garden. Adishua tried to lay her head on his shoulder as she usually did, but he shrugged and adjusted his attire. "Oh, I'm sorry, Tunde. You must be very tired. Forgive me." "I am not really tired, just not in the mood. Besides, I've told you before that you are heavy. Are you trying to give me a hunchback with all that weight?" Tunde replied harshly. Adishua tried to hide her embarrassment by switching to another topic. "How is your kingdom? How are your people doing?" she asked while trying to put a smile on her face. "This is one of the many problems I have with you. When are you going to shed this excess weight? You don't seem to remember that I am a very handsome prince with many beautiful princesses clamoring for my attention. You should sit up if you want us to remain together." Adishu was shocked by what she had just heard. Her heart sank as she simultaneously felt a pain in her stomach. Tunde had been saying such things in the past, but that day he sounded even more cruel than usual. Adishu quickly recollected herself, thinking, "He must be having a hard time with something. Let me try to calm him down. My prince, you know I told you before that despite the fact that I eat just the same amount as my sisters, I still manage to put on all this weight. I will inquire from the royal herbalist if there is anything more I can do," she said as she tried to reach for his hands. But he angrily pushed her hand away and said, "There shall be no more of this nonsense until you get serious about shedding all that weight. You are not even pretty, just very average looking, yet you are still overweight. You don't even care about improving your looks at all. Everyone knows a woman's intellect cannot compensate for her looks. You are lucky I chose to remain with you all this while, but your actions show that you aren't even grateful to have me." Tunde spoke so harshly to her. Ever since Tunde realized that Adishu didn't feel confident because of her looks, he began to look down on her and treat her with little amount of love and respect. Yet, Adishu put up with it because she felt that if the relationship wasn't working, it was all her fault. So she put every blame on herself and tried everything to make Tunde happy while making herself uncomfortable. Deep down, she believed that she was lucky to have Tunde, and if he ever left her, she didn't think she could get another person. But the arguments and insults had become too much, so much that Adishu couldn't remember the last friendly or romantic moment they had together. The weight of the whole situation weighed Adishu down. She went blank for a moment. As she closed her eyes with heart-wrenching pain, the tears she had been fighting off dropped to her chest. The memories of the past few months flashed before her eyes like a movie. She saw the many heartaches, the nights she spent crying because of things Tunde said or did, the many apologies she deserved but never got, and how she had bent herself so much trying to please him, and how unhappy she had become while investing all her time worrying about how she could make Tunde happy. She had completely lost herself trying to please him, but things had only grown worse. At that moment, she realized that she could never be perfect to Tunde, and then she suddenly found the courage to speak up. "You know what, Tunde? I love you enough to want the best for you, but it appears I can never be that person you want. You are free to pick from any of the beautiful princesses clamoring for your attention. You can tell your family that there is no need to come to ask for my hand in marriage." Tunde laughed. "What is it that you think you are doing? You will remain unmarried forever. No man will come for you." "Yes, I have thought about that too. I may not be what most men want, but I've realized that it's better to be single and happy than to be with someone who doesn't appreciate me." Tunde continued to laugh. "You will never find anyone to love you." "Oh, you are wrong. I will be there to love myself every day of my life. There is more to me than this body you see. I know that I am beautiful, brilliant, kind, wise, full of empathy and industrious. All this while, I lost myself because I placed my self-worth in what you and other people chose to see. The scales have fallen from my eyes, and I can see clearly now. I love myself enough to know that we don't deserve each other. Adishu's words angered Tunde, and just before he stormed out, he said, "If you let me leave here without an apology, you will regret it." Adishu didn't budge. She was tired and her mind was made up. "Don't ever come back begging, because I will never listen to you." Those were Tunde's final words as he stormed out in anger. Adishu was surprised by the sense of peace that enveloped her. For the first time in a while, she felt at peace with herself. She wasn't sure she would ever find another handsome prince, but she had decided that she would never allow herself to be treated poorly again or let others' opinions dictate her self-worth. A newfound confidence emerged from within her, and she realized that what mattered most was the kind of person she was and how it reflected in her actions. Adishu, who was once very self-conscious, transformed into a confident and outgoing young woman. She embraced the idea that she only had one life and decided to live it to the fullest without being worried about what people thought about her. She used to be scared of drawing attention to herself out of fear that people will comment about how unattractive she was. But it didn't matter to her anymore. She got the best dresses made for herself, wore the hairstyles she liked, and indulged in beauty treatments just like other princesses. She went out and engaged in activities she enjoyed without worrying about what people said about her. Adishu began to draw a lot of attention, and she became a source of inspiration to people of her kingdom. She was admired and soon became known to be the princess with both beauty and brains. And soon, all girls in the kingdom wanted to be like her. As some of the finest princes began seeking her hand in marriage, her parents urged her to make a decision quickly before her luck ran out or the suitors changed their mind. However, she replied with conviction, "I will take all the time that is needed, and the right person will stay. For me, it's better to be single than to be with someone who doesn't know my real value. I am not scared, neither am I in a rush." Like and subscribe. It was another cool evening in the Yoruba kingdom of Western Nigeria, and the beautiful Princess Adishu sat on the patio of her room, enjoying a breathtaking view of the kingdom and the cool evening breeze when she had a flashback. She was remembering Tunde, her former fiancé, and the last hurtful moments they had together. She recalled how he told her she was not pretty enough and he was too good for her, so she ought to be putting in extra effort to keep him. She smiled and let out a liberating chuckle. "I can't believe I allowed all that happen to me. But it's all in the past now, and I guess some things happen to help us grow and become better versions of ourselves." Not long ago, Adishu was an insecure young lady who couldn't see her beauty because she kept comparing herself to others. Lacking confidence, she believed she would never find someone to love her. But here she was today, a towering monument of self-love and confidence, admired by all and sought after by the finest princess. The people of the kingdom made several songs in her honor that echoed throughout the kingdom. One of such songs claimed that flowers bloomed instantly in the presence of Adishu's beauty and grace, and that her touch could bring back dead flowers to life. Adishu was loved, respected, and admired, and it was no wonder that a week hardly went by without a royal family from another kingdom visiting the palace to seek Adishua's hand in marriage. However, Adishua's parents knew that she would not consent to an arranged marriage, as she was not pressured in any way to get married or easily swayed by grand proposals. So, her suitors resorted to attending the kingdom's events in a bid to try to woo Adishua in various ways. Some tried to show how brilliant they were by talking about history, politics, and science. Some demonstrated their generosity by showering her with expensive gifts. Others tried to impress her with their wealth by talking about their many possessions. And some bragged about their athletic abilities and how valiant they had been in times of war. As the princes and nobles tried to outdo themselves in impressing Adishua, every kingdom had its eyes on who Adishua would pick. But impressing Adishua proved to be quite tricky because she was not easily swayed by all they bragged about, since she didn't need the validation of others to feel complete and fabulous. One morning, Adishua was awakened by one of her maids. "Yes, Shalwa, what is it?" Adishua asked as she tried to open her eyes. "I'm sorry to bother you, princess, but the king and queen have requested that you come to the court this morning. I am here to deliver the message and help you get prepared," the maid replied. Adishua was a little confused because it was unusual for the king and queen to summon her that early without any prior notice. She wondered what was going on, and she tried to get more information from the maid. "Do you know what this is all about, Shalwa? And have you noticed anything strange in the palace this morning?" "No, ma'am," Shalwa replied promptly as she pursed her lips and tried to put a focused expression on her face while adjusting Adishua's dress. "Are you sure? You have been more than a maid to me, Shalwa, and I know you all too well. I sense that there is something you are not telling me," Adishua said. "That's not the case, princess. All I know is that we have visitors from another kingdom, and the queen has asked everyone to be quiet about it. Please, Adishua, the queen must not know I told you this. I do not want to lose my job here." "Thank you, Shalwa. I understand. You have nothing to fear. You can go. That will be all for now," Adishua said. Shalwa thanked her and left. And as Adishua made her way to the court, she wondered why she was being requested to come to the court that morning. As soon as she got there, she was shocked by what she saw. Tunde, her former fiancé, and his entourage were ceremoniously sitting before the king. "I wonder what they are doing here, because they are certainly not here to see me," Adishua thought. The queen then smiled and welcomed Adishua, motioning her to take a seat. The king and queen then explained to Adishua that Tunde and his companions had been there since the previous night, hoping to have a word with her. Then they gave him the opportunity to speak. Getting on his knees with his companions, he apologized profusely for his actions and asked that they continue their relationship. When they were done, Princess Adishua spoke. "If I had not forgiven you, I would have walked away the minute I saw you. I forgave you a long time ago, Tunde, but I honestly don't believe we have anything more to talk about," Adishua said quite frankly. Tunde and his companions were saddened by her response and continued to plead that she give the relationship a second chance. Since the conversation wasn't heading anywhere, the queen intervened. "Both of you are within your rights. You are within your right to apologize, and the princess reserves the right to accept or reject your apology. However, I recall how much both of you connected when you first met. That is one of the reasons I accepted to take part in this. We can't force you to pick up from where you stopped, but we can advise you both. Tunde, it is good that you have tried to make good the wrong you did by our daughter. But you have to understand that she was deeply hurt and it may take some time for her to even trust you again. Talk less of agreeing to your proposal. Tunde thanked them, presented the gifts they had bought for Adishu and her family, then left. When he left, the queen talked to Adishu. Tunde is a good man, but we will never force you to do something against your will. I only advise that you think about it because no one is above mistakes, not even you. We taught you to treat others as you would like to be treated because another day you might be in their own shoes seeking the forgiveness of your adversary. So please, give it a thought. Adishu nodded and left the presence of her parents. Tunde continued to visit the palace every other day, trying to see Adishu, but she wouldn't even come out to see him. Yet, Tunde was undeterred. He continued to show up with thoughtful gifts and happily engaged with members of Adishu's family and the palace staff, just like he did when they were together. When he traveled to distant lands, he brought gifts for Adishu and her family before proceeding to his kingdom. When Adishu had royal duties, Tunde made sure he showed up to support her even when she refused to see him. When he thought of ideas that could help her in discharging her duties better, he put them in writing and made sure it got to her. He wrote poems and had his royal bed messenger deliver it to Adishu's window. Even when he got really sick, he did not stop. Adishu was constantly on his mind and he was determined to go over and beyond to win back her love. One evening, the queen knocked on Adishu's room door. She had come to have a conversation. She told Adishu about the mistakes her husband the king had made when they were younger and reminded Adishu that no one is above mistakes. Adishu had always admired the marriage of her parents, and hearing her mother's words made her realize that she might have been a little too hard on Tunde. Very well then, but I will only accept him when I am convinced of his love. I have been through too much and I don't want a repeat of that again, Adishu responded. Oh, I will never force you to accept him or any man for that matter. I'm only here to give you more perspective so that you can make informed decisions. I trust you, Adishu. We all trust you. Listen to your heart. It always knows the way. The next time Tunde visited the palace, he tried to strike a conversation with Adishu and she responded. Tunde was over the moon with joy and excitement. He had so much he wanted to share with Adishu, but he began by apologizing again and promising to do well by Adishu. Before long, they were engaging in deep emotional conversations like they did in the past. That was one of the things Adishu missed, the connection they once had. Tunde was doing everything to make up for lost time. He invited Adishu for every royal function he had and was always at the palace to promptly pick her up. He always arrived with the most romantic gifts and filled her up with praise. He seemed to notice every single thing about her and lavished compliments on her. If she had royal duties of her own, he was always very thoughtful in the ways he supported her to make it a success. When they walked, he held her hand and was many times spotted adjusting the train of her dress. They looked like something off the pages of a fairy tale storybook, and the whole kingdom thought they made a great couple. Shortly after, Tunde proposed to marry Adishu by the next moon. I think we should take it a little slower, Tunde. I feel the next moon is just too soon, Adishu said in response. I guess you are right. Take your time, my princess, Tunde said in agreement. In a week's time, Tunde brought up the same marriage proposal, and Adishu looked at him with a puzzled expression. "We talked about this just last week, Tunde. I thought we agreed to give it some time." Tunde smiled and added, "I was just trying my luck. Who knows? The gods might have changed your mind in your sleep." And they brushed it off. Surprisingly, Tunde brought up the same marriage proposal the next week, and this time it bothered Adishu. So she spoke up. "I feel like you are pressuring me to accept this proposal even when I don't feel ready yet, Tunde." Adishu responded, "But what more do you have to think about, Adishu? Haven't I proven that I love you enough?" Tunde asked. "Tunde, we just got back together, and given the circumstances that led to our last separation, I believe I should take my time." Adishu responded, but Tunde had been suppressing his anger all this while and started to express himself in an intense way. "Adishu, I don't think that's the case. I think you love the attention you are getting from all the other princes. And you know that they are obligated to stop as soon as our engagement is announced. You don't care about my feelings and how all this attention you are getting makes me feel. An honorable princess will do the right thing by accepting to be married as soon as she finds a good prince." Adishu listened as Tunde continued to ramble. When he noticed her silence, he reached for her hands and said, "Forgive me, my princess. I get emotional when it comes to you because I love you so much, and I would almost die if I allow someone else to have you. Please accept my proposal and let's get married by the next market day. We can make it really quick. I already have a place for you set in my palace. You would have no need for anything. You won't even need to come back to see your family for any reason because you will have all you want. I can and am willing to provide for you." "I am still undecided," Adishu said. But her response made Tunde to flare up. "What do you mean? Am I not enough for you? Who among the other princes seeking your attention is better than I am? I am more good looking and affluent than all of them combined. I could have princes who are even better looking than you are. I just don't want to be promiscuous, that's why I'm with you. What have I not done for you, Adishu? Is this how you repay me? With ingratitude? You are ungrateful, and I was right to have left you in the first place." With that, Adishu simply got up, adjusted her dress and said, "That's it. I believe we have both overstayed our welcome. I have other things to attend to. Good night." Tunde begged her not to leave, but she had better use of her time. He apologized profusely, saying his temper got the best of him. She replied, "Well, I'm not willing to settle for anyone who cannot control their temper around people they claim to love more than anyone else. Once might be a mistake, twice a coincidence, but anything more than that is a pattern. This is who you are, Tunde, and I don't think we are a good match. Have a good evening." Adishu said, and she walked back to her room, confident, with her head held up high and her self-esteem intact. But as soon as she reached her room, she broke down into heart-wrenching tears. She didn't realize she had fallen back in love with Tunde. Despite how she tried to remain guarded, his gestures and the little things she loved about him had gotten the best of her. She felt a little disappointed in herself and started crying. How could I have allowed this to happen? Just then, she heard a soft knock on the door. It was her father. He had been watching her all evening and followed her to make sure she was all right. He came in and asked gently, "Can I sit here?" Adishu nodded, and he sat calmly by her side in solidarity while she cried. Then he comforted her and allowed her to speak when she felt ready. "Father, why am I so naive? How did I allow myself to fall for Tunde again? Her father laughed slightly. Heavens, child, you are not naive. You are just human, and it's a beautiful thing. It is human to love. It is only broken people who cannot love. I am proud of you and how you conducted yourself through it all. Despite all Tunde's grand gestures, you remained grounded in yourself, and like a real princess, you walked away from a situation that was not serving you, even though you really loved him. This is such a great thing, because for us to truly love others, we must practice loving ourselves to the fullest degree. Once we can do that, it is from that cup of overflowing love that we can in turn pour into others. Tunde might be a great man in many regards, but he has a lot of work to do on himself if he is ever to get a princess like you. Thank you, Father. You are so wise, Adishu said as she embraced her father, the king. No one is actually born wise, Adishu. The experiences we go through in life shape us to be who we are. Some bitter, some sweet, but we have to make sure we extract the lessons in every circumstance. This is what I want you to do in this situation. You are becoming a really wise young woman, and you will make a great queen someday. Adishu didn't want to see Tunde again, and even though he made frantic efforts to see her, Adishu's father, the king, made sure it never happened. Soon, Tunde realized he had lost the golden opportunity of becoming Adishu's partner and had to live with it. Adishu continued to discharge her royal duties as a wiser, more accomplished princess, and she continued to be the toast of the kingdom. Every time she looked back, she was grateful that she had cultivated a level of self-love that allowed her to make the best decisions for herself, irrespective of what she felt at the moment. And as for suitors, the caliber of men she attracted increased as people got a higher level of respect for her when they got to know her story and how much she loved and respected herself. Subscribe and share with those you love.
Nenna had another daughter, but this time, the baby looked nothing like her sisters. She was tiny, with strange features, and not what Nenna expected. Tears filled Nenna's eyes in horror and sadness as she stared at the baby. Once upon a time, in a quaint village named Anaku, nestled in the eastern part of Nigeria, and under King Oji's kind rule, lived Childe and Nenna, a couple whose beauty was the talk of the town. Everyone in Anaku would dream out loud about their future children, convinced that such stunning parents would only have the most breathtakingly beautiful kids. Just as everyone guessed, Childe and Nenna were blessed with 4 beautiful daughters, Apunau, Ugomma, Oyibo, and Bekee. These girls were so stunning that anyone who saw them had to stop and look again. Their beauty became the pride of the village. People praised Nenna's womb of beauty, and mothers often gifted the girls, hoping one day their sons would win their hearts. Years later, Nenna had another daughter, but this time, the baby looked nothing like her sisters. She was tiny and had strange features. She was not what Nenna expected. Tears filled Nenna's eyes in horror and sadness. Her husband, unable to face the unexpected, fled, claiming he couldn't stay with what he wrongly called evil under his roof. Nenna's heart was shattered. torn between the pain of her husband's departure and the arrival of her strange child. Conflicted and overwhelmed, she kept the baby hidden, secretly wishing for her to quietly die. Yet, as the child resiliently clung to life, Nena slowly accepted her reality. She named the child Emerem Guinea, meaning, "What did I do?" Emerem began growing up and grew up to be a very ugly girl. Her sisters treated her like she was a disease, and no one even cared if she was human. Her mother would never let her out of the house. She was always indoors to avoid the wagging mouth of the villagers. But it didn't stop them, as the villagers still talked. Emerem was turned into a slave in her own father's house because she was ugly and looked very tidy. She wasn't growing like every normal child. She did all the house chores in the house, yet no one appreciated her. At every slightest mistake, her mother would call her a cursed child. "What did I ever do to deserve a child like you? You do not look like your mother. You do not look like your father. You are an abomination." Sometimes, Emerem doubted if Nena was truly her mother, as it seemed like she had only 4 children. But she endured all the ill treatments, hoping that she would die one day. She never thought there would ever be hope for her. Every day, Emerem sat alone and cried. She couldn't help but notice how different she looked from her sisters, and she couldn't understand what she had done to deserve such a harsh life. While her mother showered her sisters with lovely gifts, no one spared Emerem a glance, unless they needed her to do some chores. Emerem's mother made it clear she was not to leave the house. Yet, whenever the house was empty, Emerem found solace in the forest, beneath the comforting shade of a tree. There, surrounded by the quiet of the woods, she would sing. Singing breathed life into her, lifted her from her sadness, and for a brief time made her forget her troubles at home. Singing became a secret joy, and each evening, before anyone else came back, she would hurry home, holding onto the peace she found in her melodies. One day, while Emerem was lost in her songs under the tree, some girls returning with firewood spotted her. Dropping their loads in fear, they raced home, shouting, "Evil spirits! Evil spirits! Evil spirits!" Realizing the danger, Emerem knew she had to rush home to avoid being caught. By sundown, rumors had flown across the village about an evil spirit haunting the Achara forest, which had supposedly sought refuge in Nina's house. Unknown to Emerem, some of the children who saw her followed her home as she ran, tracing the source of their fear right to her doorstep. Immediately Nina heard this, she was so angry that she ran home, cursing at Emerem under her breath. "That evil child wants to embarrass me. Today, I will deal with her." When she got home, she angrily asked Emerem why she left the hut against her instructions. But as Emerem opened her mouth to speak, she began to hit her. "You want to disgrace me in this village, you cursed child." She lashed at her. When she left, Emerem cried her heart out, wishing death would take her. She couldn't bear the thought that she looked like nothing but an evil spirit in the eyes of the village children, and also couldn't understand why her mother hated her that much. She didn't create herself, she cried. When everything had died down, her mother came into her room and called her out in the middle of the night. I need you to escort me somewhere, she said to her. A friend of mine needs help. Miriam was surprised. Her mother had never calmly spoken to her before, so she felt her mother regretted her actions towards her and wanted to make amends. Hence, she followed her happily. They walked for a long time, crossing rivers and climbing mountains. But the journey was endless. At some point, Miriam got tired. Mother, this place we are going to, is it still far? No, she responded. We are almost there. Miriam was scared to provoke her mother by asking her more questions. But she wondered why her mother's friend had to live in that faraway forest. As they got to the middle of nowhere, her mother stopped and faced her. I don't know how I got you, evil child. You have brought only pain to my heart, and I wish you died the day I had you. I've always prayed for you to die since I had you, but you refused to die. Rather, you have only brought me pain and shame. I won't allow you to embarrass me before the villagers. That's why I've brought you here. She turned, leaving Miriam in the forest. Miriam cried and cried, pleading with her mother, but her mother ignored her and went back home. Miriam was heartbroken. The forest howled with different sounds of wild animals, and she clutched her heart in fear. Her mother had just abandoned her to die in the forest. Out of fear, she ran after her mother, calling and pleading with her not to leave her. But she lost her to the dark forest. She began wandering around the forest, and when she got tired, Miriam sat under a tree and cried her heart out. She knew she was going to die, and she prayed the death came quickly. The forest was dark and terrifying, and she closed her eyes. Soon, sleep took over her. Miriam felt a gentle tap and opened her eyes to see an old woman in front of her. She quickly stood up, scared and shaking, almost wetting herself. She realized she was still in the forest and was puzzled to see the old woman there. Then, the old woman spoke in a voice that was calm and comforting. My dear, don't be scared. I mean no harm. I was just getting some cooking water and saw you. Why are you out here? Miriam thought back to what happened the night before and started to cry. The old woman gently comforted her and then invited her to come home with her, saying she couldn't stand the thought of leaving Miriam alone in the forest. Miriam carried the water alongside the old woman as they headed to her home. They arrived at a simple, somewhat run-down hut, hidden deep in the forest. Despite its appearance, the place was tidy, clearly someone's home. Miriam couldn't help but feel it was a bit strange. Who would choose to live all alone out here, she wondered. She was even more surprised when the old woman mentioned she had been living there for more than 20 years. The old woman cooked some boiled yam, explaining to Miriam that she found the seeds in the forest and planted them near her hut. She also had plenty of fruits and veggies, suggesting a life of simple self-sufficiency surrounded by nature. After their meal, Miriam opened up about her life, and the old woman listened with deep sympathy. "Your mother has been very cruel," she said, clearly upset. "I would have been grateful to have a child, no matter what she looked like, even like you. But don't worry, I will help you." The old woman began to share her own story with Emerem, making the moment even more special. She told her about a long time ago when she got married, full of hopes and dreams. However, life had other plans. She couldn't have children, which brought her much sadness. Seeing this, her husband decided to marry another woman in hopes of having a child. Tragically, when the new wife had a baby, the baby didn't survive. Immediately, fingers pointed at her, accusing her of causing the baby's death out of jealousy. The situation worsened when her co-wife also passed away from a mysterious illness. And again, the blame fell squarely on her shoulders. Her husband, swayed by the villagers' gossip, couldn't stand by her, and she was unjustly labeled a witch and banished to what they call the evil forest. "I've lived here since that day," she told Emirem, her voice a mix of sorrow and strength. "For 20 years, I've been all alone, with not a single soul passing by. But now, I think the gods saved me just for you. You are not just any child, you are a star. And I see its glow right on your forehead." Emirem laughed. "A star? Me? Here in this thick so-called evil forest?" It all seemed too strange and unbelievable. But what she didn't realize was that Oyego, the old woman, was no ordinary person. She had incredible powers hidden beneath her humble appearance and the simple life she led in the forest. Emerem was about to discover just how extraordinary her new friend was. The connection between her and Emerem grew stronger as they both found solace in their shared experiences of unjust treatment and exile. In the village, Nnenna felt a weight lift off her shoulders. A secret she had harbored for years now seemingly resolved. Whenever someone inquired about Emerem, Nnenna simply said she had died. She couldn't stand the thought of being labeled an evil woman just because she had a child who looked strange. This lie was her escape from judgment and the whispers of the villagers, providing her with a false sense of relief from the guilt and complexity of her relationship with Emerem. Life continued to be favorable for Nnenna's beautiful daughters, who had blossomed into stunning young women. Their beauty was renowned throughout the kingdom, drawing suitors from far and near to their doorstep, each one hoping to win the hearts of one of these celebrated sisters. The fame of their attractiveness had spread so widely that their home became a gathering place for those seeking to marry, not just for love, but for the allure that came with the promise of such remarkable beauty. Meanwhile, in the village of Anako, King Oji was facing his golden years with a heavy heart, caught in a web of uncertainty. As the tradition dictated, he was to pass on the crown to one of his sons before he departed from this world. However, the palace was shrouded in confusion, as the decision of who should inherit the kingship was not clear-cut. This predicament left the entire royal household, and indeed the village at large, in a state of anxious anticipation, wondering how the king would resolve this crucial dilemma. King Oji's dilemma revolved around his two sons, Chike and Dike, who were twins. Their entrance into the world was marked by a tale as unique as they were. The queen went into labor under the cover of the night, and in the urgency of the moment, her maidservants dashed out to summon the midwife. However, by the time the midwife arrived at the queen's chamber, the twins had already been born. In the hustle to clean and care for the queen and her newborns, no one thought to note which of the twins had been born first. This oversight led to a pressing and unprecedented question within the palace walls. Which of the twins was destined to ascend the throne? The lack of clarity on this critical detail posed a significant challenge, casting a shadow of uncertainty over the future leadership of Anako. As King Oji grew older, his concerns deepened. His sons Chike and Dike shared a bond deeper than mere brotherhood. They were the best of friends, yet it was clear that their hearts lay in different places. Chike harbored a deep fascination with the throne, often lost in daydreams of ruling Anako. He was drawn to the prestige and respect that came with being king. Dike, on the other hand, showed little interest in royal ambitions. His nature was gentle and lovable, making him beloved among the people. His passion was his ranch, where he poured his energy and love, content with the life he built away from the throne's allure. King Oji noticed Chike's keen interest in leadership and Dike's indifference. Despite understanding Chike's desires, the king resolved to leave the decision to the gods. He believed in allowing a higher power to guide the future of Anako. If the gods chose Chike, then he would accept that destiny with open arms, trusting that the welfare of his kingdoms would be in the hands of fate. King Oji, seeking wisdom, gathered with the village elders to call upon Ezemo, revered as the eyes of the gods, for guidance. Upon arrival, Ezemo made himself comfortable on a spread-out mat, entering a state of deep communion with the deities of the land. After a solemn period of invocation, he shared the divine directive. The princes were to undertake a quest in 4 market days, venturing into the mysterious Ajadu forest. Their mission was to find a special staff hidden deep within the earth of the forest. The true heir to the throne would be revealed by a guiding light within the forest, leading him to the staff, a sign of the gods' favor and protection. The king felt a weight lift from his shoulders with the assurance of his son's safe return. By the chief priest. Following the seer's instructions, the princes were to undergo a purification ritual without delay, preparing their spirits and bodies for the pivotal journey ahead. This process was not just about physical readiness, but symbolized their readiness to face whatever challenges lay in the path dictated by the gods, embarking on a journey that would not only test their courage, but also define the future of Anako. In the serene heart of the forest, where Uyego and Emerem had found solace together. Uyego revealed a significant truth to Emerem. Uyego wasn't just any inhabitant of the forest. She was a seer, blessed with profound insight and power. She unveiled the dark tale of Emerem's birth. Something very grave happened while your mother was carrying you, Uyego began. One day, she visited the market with a craving for a particular type of meat. However, the price was far beyond what she was willing to pay. Despite the cost, her desire was overpowering. Amidst the hustle and crowd around the butcher's store, she seized the opportunity to take the meat without payment. Unnoticed, she left, leaving behind an innocent woman to bear the blame and the consequences of her actions. This woman, wrongly accused and publicly humiliated, as the angry mob stripped her naked and beat her up, cried out in her anguish and innocence, causing her accusers and the unseen thief to bear a lifetime of shame. Since your mother was pregnant with you, the curse took hold on you instead. Tears streamed down Emerem's cheeks as she absorbed the tale of her mother's deed, understanding for the first time the source of her pain and difference. Uyego comforted her, promising liberation from the curse. They would undertake a 7-day ritual of purification and appeal to the spirits for mercy. During this time, Emerem was to fast from food and water, preparing her spirit and body for the final step of the ritual. On the 7th day, she would immerse herself in the sacred waters of the Ajadu River, washing away the curse and emerging renewed, ready to embrace her true essence, free from the shadows of the curse. As the quest for the future king of Anaku began, Princess Chike and Dike ventured into the dense Ajadu forest, their paths diverging as soon as they sought the divine staff. Guided by Ezemo's prophecy, they knew they just had 7 days to complete their task. Chike, driven by his ambition, searched tirelessly, yet the guiding light eluded him. Dike too found no sign of the light for days, growing weary with the search. On the 3rd day, Chike stumbled upon an old woman in distress, her cries piercing the forest's silence. Focused solely on his quest for kingship, he chose to ignore her plea for help, convinced that nothing should divert his attention from his goal. Meanwhile, Dike, seeking a moment's rest, had the same cries of panic and pain. Despite his initial fear and confusion, his compassionate heart couldn't ignore the suffering voice. Driven by the desire to aid, he followed the sounds, only to find the old woman suddenly disappear as he approached her. In her place, a bright light appeared, beckoning him forward. He followed the light, which led him through the dense forest to a vast cave. Inside, the light focused on a glowing spot on the cave floor. Filled with determination, Dike dug at the spot and unearthed the staff, its glow a beacon of his success. The journey back home was filled with a sense of accomplishment and relief. Unlike his brother, Dike had allowed his kindness to guide him and had led him to the very goal they both sought. Upon crossing two rivers on his journey back, Dike encountered Chike and excitedly shared his discovery. Chike's heart sank with the news, and bitterness swiftly took root in his heart. He couldn't understand why Dike, who already seemed to have everything, love from the queen, adoration from the townspeople, and wealth from his successful ranch, should also be the one to find the staff. This was the one thing Chike had longed for himself. Hiding his envy, Chike congratulated Dike and asked for a brief pause, claiming he needed a moment alone to ease himself. Trusting and unsuspecting, Dike waited under a tree. Seizing this moment, Chike attacked Dike from behind with a heavy stick, striking him until he fell motionless. Believing Dike to be dead, Chike grabbed the staff and hurried back to the village. His return sparked widespread celebration among the villagers, who interpreted his success as divine selection. The air was filled with the rhythm of drums and the joy of dancers, as the village had been filled with anticipation since the princes had departed. Drained and hungry from his days in the forest, Chike was welcomed with a lavish meal prepared by his mother. As he rested from the ordeal, the villagers' joy was tinged with concern for Dike, whose fate remained unknown to them. The celebration for Chike's return masked a dark deed, leaving the true test of character and destiny unresolved. Emerem had fulfilled the 7-day ritual and had taken her bath in the Ajadu River. True to the words of Uyego, she came out of the water with a very beautiful skin, her deformity totally healed, and her body glowing like the sun itself. She was so happy, as she couldn't believe she would no longer live with the stigma. Uyego asked her to return back home so she could live her dreams, but she said no, choosing to stay back with her instead. She couldn't leave Uyego, as she was the kindest woman she ever met. Besides, Uyego was old and needed some help around. One evening, while returning from the river, Emerem was startled by the sound of someone in pain. Overcoming her fear, she went close and discovered a man lying in the forest, weakened and bleeding. Rushing back, she called Uyego, and together they brought the man to their hut. Uyego, with her knowledge of healing, took care of his wounds and began treating him with her herbal remedies. Meanwhile, the palace was engulfed in worry. Over a week had passed without any sign of Prince Dike, prompting the king to dispatch a search team into the forest, with orders to return with the prince alive or dead. But even after an exhaustive search, extending beyond 14 days, there was no trace of him. The king, heartbroken, assumed the worst, that his beloved son had fallen prey to wild beasts, and declared a 7-day mourning period for Dike, a testament to the prince's widespread adoration. Following the mourning, plans were made to continue with the traditional rituals leading up to the coronation, including a 14-day period of fortification for the prince, culminating in the official ceremony. The kingdom prepared to move forward.
even as DK's fate remained unknown to them. His true situation, hidden within the depths of the forest under Uyego and Emerem's care. In the forest, Prince DK was recovering fast. He could now talk and eat properly. He had shared his sad story with his new friends, and they felt so sorry for him. It was unfortunate that the three of them had treaded the path of betrayal, and it was the one thing that brought them together. You will get better soon, and you will go back to your village in good health. The gods have preserved you for the throne, Uyego said to him. DK couldn't still believe his own brother did that to him, and all for the throne. But he was glad the gods saved him. He enjoyed the company of Emerem and the old woman. Uyego was very nice and caring, and Emerem was a beauty with an angelic voice. Every evening, she would sit under the tree and sing the prince beautiful songs, which he enjoyed so much. With time, they grew closer, and each day the prince found more reasons to love her. She was so beautiful. The way she took care of him and the beautiful songs she sang him could not just leave his mind. Uyego had caught him severally as he stared at her while she cooked, and it got her so excited. He knew within him that he had just found a wife, the woman of his dreams. On the day of the coronation, the whole village gathered to celebrate the crowning of the new king. Kings and princes from different kingdoms were invited. Noblemen of calibers were invited. Prince Chike felt so proud. He had dreamt about this day his whole life, and in a few hours he would be pronounced king. That day, he dressed in his royal apparel and looked so handsome. When he stepped out, the villagers couldn't argue that the gods had made the right choice, as Prince Chike looked so glorious in his royal attire. As the traditional priest and the Onowu, the chief kingmaker, conducted the final rituals of the coronation, Chike was declared king. Yet, as he attempted to sit on the throne, an unseen force repelled him. He tried severally to sit on the throne, but each time he tried it, it burned him. It was as if the seat of power rejected him. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their excitement turning to confusion and fear as they couldn't understand what was happening. Just then, Ezemo, the revered seer, entered. All eyes turned to him, desperate for an explanation of the unsettling spectacle. With a voice that commanded attention, Ezemo revealed the truth. Prince Chike is not the rightful king of this land. He has not earned the staff, and he knows what happened to his brother, Dike. Under Ezemo's powerful enchantment, Chike found himself compelled to speak the truth. He fell to his knees, his voice breaking as he confessed to attacking Dike in the forest, taking the staff by force and leaving his brother dead. The king, along with everyone present, was shocked. Your own twin brother, the king repeated, unable to grasp the magnitude of Chike's betrayal. The villagers expressed their disdain, openly rejecting the heinous acts Chike had committed. Then, amidst the turmoil, Ezemo announced a turn of fortune. With all eyes on him, he prepared to share a revelation that would reshape the destiny of Anako. Prince Dike is alive and in the heart of the forest, around the Ajadu River. He was found by two kind people and has fully regained himself. Let the king send out men to go into the forest and bring back the prince. And as for Chike, the king should decide his punishment. With that, he turned and left. Without delay, the king sent out a search party immediately, and they all hurried down to the forest to bring back the prince. Uyego was happy when she saw the king's men. She knew they had come for the prince, and was also happy that Emerem finally found fulfillment. She had watched her bond with the prince, and the love between them was undeniable. Finally, she could die a fulfilled woman, as God has used her to save a kingdom that rejected her 20 years ago. They thanked Uyego and Emerem and took the prince. Tears rolled down Emerem's eyes. She was so sad the prince was leaving, as they both had bonded so well, and she was going to miss him dearly. The prince was a very kind and soft man, and the way he conversed with her, she was so in love with him. She never thought she would ever see him again. But the prince had no plans to leave them. He ordered the men to bring them out of the forest, as they both saved his life. But Uyego insisted she would stay back. That place was home to her, and she never would leave her home. Unknown to them, Uyego was no human but a spirit. She was the guardian of the forest and had existed for over 1,000 years. Her mission was to rescue good people and not allow any harm come near them. But she never reveals her identity to humans so that they wouldn't be scared of her. She could be an old woman, and she could also be a young woman whenever she wanted. All the stories about the villagers banishing her were all made up, and her hut could only be visible whenever she wanted it to be. That was why the first search party couldn't see the hut. She held Dike and Emerem's hand and blessed them. Then she bade them goodbye. As they set off, Emerem turned to bid her goodbye once more, as she wasn't happy to leave her behind. But to her utter amazement, everything had vanished. Fear gripped them, as they now knew that they had been with a god and not a man. The villagers went crazy at the sight of Prince Dike. Everyone was so happy to see him. His mother shed tears of joy. He was a man after the heart of the people. Ezemo was also there to celebrate the prince in person, and a date was fixed immediately for his coronation. It was going to be a double celebration, as he would also be getting married the same day to the love of his life, Emerem. The prince narrated the story of how he found Emerem in the forest and how she was abandoned by her mother, Nnenna. Nnenna was shocked. She couldn't believe it was Emerem standing with the prince. She had changed and looked so beautiful. She cried her heart out when she learned she was the cause of Emerem's misery. Yet, she treated her with so much wickedness. Her sisters, who were all still unmarried, as we were waiting for kings and rich men to come ask for their hand in marriage were so sorry, as they had all treated Emirem badly. They came closer as they knelt and asked their sister for forgiveness. Emirem had a good heart, and she knew she deserved to be happy and free. The gods had turned her pains into joy. Therefore, she forgave her sisters and her mother. She knew they must have learned their lessons. The villagers stood in shock as the prince openly made his intentions to marry Emirem known. He told them that she was the best thing that had happened to him in his journey. He looked at her with so much love in his eyes, and Emirem loved him too. On a grand occasion, Prince Dike was crowned king alongside his queen Emirem. They got married and lived happily ever after. The king disowned Chike and sent him out of the palace. He was to live like an ordinary man in the village as punishment for what he had done. Thank you so much for taking out your time to watch this beautiful story. And I hope you enjoyed the story. I would like you to share your lessons in the comment sections. And also, don't forget to tell us where you are watching from. If you are yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, please don't skip this video without subscribing. And turn on your notification bell so that you get notified whenever we post new stories.
Oh, I also have a favorite quote, she said. When life gives you lemons, squeeze it in people's eyes, but you don't even have any lemons to squeeze. Abaucho said, looking at Omichi with a smile, breaking into laughter that everyone joined in. Omichi looked at Abucho, smiling back. Well, there are so many eyes in this village, your lemons must be really stressed out. I hope they don't get saggy, Omichi said. A brief silence followed after, and people stared at each other's faces trying to hold their laughter. In the beautiful and tranquil village of Agassiya, blessed with picturesque waterfalls and scenic landscape, there was and lived a girl called Omichi. She was the daughter of Queen Chioba, the second wife of the king. Her father, King Obina, had 3 wives, and Omichi had 3 other siblings from different mums in the palace, an elder sister named Abaucho and 2 junior brothers. Omichi was a very beautiful girl who loved painting and spending time outside with nature. She was known for her gentle and kind heart. She was slenderly shaped, and it suited her perfectly. However, Omichi had one problem, one thing that plagued her every waking moment: her flat chest. From a young age, Omichi struggled with her appearance. She remained flat-chested, watching her peers blossom in their teens, her figure failing to develop as expected. Despite her beauty and kind heart, Omichi's lack of curves became a source of insecurity and ridicule in the kingdom that maintained unspoken societal beauty standards. Since she passed the age of puberty, Omichi started facing cruel jokes and judgment from her peers, the villagers, and even her mother because of her flat chest, unlike her elder sister Abaucho, who boasted curves that turned heads and drew men. Omichi felt like she was overlooked and invisible in comparison. Her mom, the queen of the village, would often scold her. "Omichi, you must grow something on your chest if you want to get married. Are you a man?" her mom would say. Omichi would sometimes put clothes in her chest and try eating a lot of food with different recipes and even use local drugs her mum would suggest, but it wouldn't work. Queen Chioba even took her to the traditional herbalist to make her daughter grow breasts, but no matter how they tried, nothing worked. The people of Agassiya village interpreted a curvaceous body as a sign of fertility and would usually talk behind Omichi's back, calling her Prince Omichi instead of a princess. Any time Omichi was walking in the streets of the village, she couldn't help but feel self-aware and would subconsciously compare herself with curvy women and even little girls in the village. All the cruel things Omichi faced led her to creating unhealthy habits. She became very quiet and was always silent in her room. One evening, as Omichi laid on her bed in her royal room, drawing a picture and humming a beautiful melody, her mum quickly rushed into the room. "Omichi Prince Ganje from Dango Kingdom is coming to our village next month to check for a wife. If you get married to him, the bond will strengthen us and change our lives and make you queen. Omichi, you have to get ready," her mum said, looking into Omochi's eyes, and she summoned the maids carrying a lot of foods in trays in. Omichi looked at her mum with an unsurprising look. "You must grow and look like a woman before the prince arrives, my daughter not like—" "Ah," her mum said, making a sarcastic face. Omichi nodded in agreement, her face pale from the embarrassment of disappointing herself and her mum, and she proceeded to eat. For the next couple weeks, Omichi ate 6 times a day every day and stayed indoors to save her strength. Her elder sister Abacho with her friends would come and make fun of Omichi in her room. "Look at her eating everything, the only thing growing in your body is your stomach, tiny fish." "Abacho," her sister said, laughing ecstatically. "See a complete bride here, do you think the prince will look at another prince?" she said, laughing with her friends. Omichi looked at her sister Abaucho with a disdainful eyes and continued eating. Every single day her mum would bring her meat and fish and foods of different sorts, and Omichi kept eating, and she ate until she fell sick from overeating. The little weight she added got lost again after she fell sick, and this made her mum very angry. "Omichi, look at you. With all the food you ate, do you think the prince will look at someone as skinny as you?" her mum said with a frown on her face. The depression from her disappointment made Omichi become more sad and even more sick. After a few days of her health getting better, Omichi had recovered, and she decided to quit eating 6 times a day and eat the way she was supposed to. "I won't kill myself for any prince. Anything that wants to happen should happen." The morning sun was glowing a deeper hue of orange that morning. Finally, it was the day of the prince's arrival. The palace was in anticipation, and everyone was preparing excitedly. Abaucho dressed in a white, elegant, seductive dress, walking around the palace with an aura of pride and confidence, while Omichi was in her room trying to decide the clothes to wear. But she couldn't pick one. Her mum came looking into the room. "Omichi, you haven't dressed. Why are you like this? Why do you want to be so useless?" her mum said, and she shook her head. This words hurt Omichi and made her so angry. "Mother, if you want. Nobody is stopping you from marrying the prince, just leave me alone. I've had enough of this." Her mother was in shock, and she looked disappointed. "What a disgraceful child," her mother said, and she bashed out of Omichi's room. Omichi's heart was full of guilt and stress as she looked at her closet, with clothes of different colors staring back at her. "Don't overthink it," she said, and she closed her eyes. "Any clothes my hands touch, I will wear," she said as she walked with her eyes closed to the closet. Her hands fell on a cloth, and as she opened her eyes, she saw it was a wine royal gown. Omichi wore the clothes and started dressing and grooming herself. "They are here, ooh," a voice shouted and a trumpet sound echoed. Omichi quickly finished up grooming her hair and face, and she ran out of her room towards the palace. As she ran, pulling her long royal gown, a stick caught the gown behind her back and ripped away the lower part of the gown into halves. Omichi was in shock. Seeing the dress she had picked was now torn. She panicked and wondered what to do, and quickly went to change her gown. She wore the same clothes she had taken off and headed on to the palace. On getting to the palace, everyone was already gathered and the royals were introduced. Omichi didn't want to call attention to herself, so she hid behind some group of visitors who accompanied the prince. "Trying to hide that much, you should have worn a camouflage," a manly voice said. Omichi turned around and saw a man dressed in royal attire, looking down at her with a smile. "I wanted to, but they wouldn't fit," Omichi responded. The man let out a smile, looking at her. "I am Siudo, the cousin to the prince," he said, "and I am the hiding princess of the palace," Omichi responded, and this made Siudo chuckle. The announcer started introducing the royal titles of the palace to the prince, and it got to the turn of the princesses. "Princess Abaucho, daughter of Queen Maoi," the announcer said, and Princess Abaucho showed herself majestically to the prince. The announcer continued, "Princess Omichi, daughter of Queen Chioba." Omichi raised her hands, trying to signify where she was, but nobody could notice. "She's right here," Suido said with a soft but overwhelming voice that made everyone quiet down, and he walked her through the crowded palace to the front of the prince. Everyone was in utter silence as she was walking by Suido to the front of the prince. The prince, named Ganje, looked at her with an emotionless face, and Omichi stepped aside, standing beside Abaucho, who looked at her with an angry and sarcastic grin. Prince Ganji stood up amongst the people. "We will be spending a few weeks with you to get to know your customs and our bride-to-be. Thanks for all your warmth," he said. And everyone smiled and started chatting. Suido walked up to Omichi. "Wow, you really had everyone silent for a minute there," he said. And Omichi smiled. Abaucho watched Omichi with a disgusted face, but later changed it into a smile when Prince Ganji approached the trio. "Well, it seems we already have a party here," the prince said, walking into their company. Suido smiled at the prince. "You surely are good in crashing it, right?" he said as Prince Ganji cast his eyes on Omichi and moved them to Abaucho, before smiling, looking into Abaucho's eyes. "Walk with me," Prince Ganji said, stretching his hands to Abaucho, who accepted his hands with a smile. Suido and Omichi were left watching them. "Walk into the crowds. Aren't they just perfect for each other?" Omichi said, "Yes, I think so. They both kind of walk the same way already," Suido said. And both of them smiled, staring into each other's eyes like friends who had known themselves for a long time. "Mind showing around?" Suido said, breaking the silence, and Omichi agreed, taking Suido around the palace and also showing her the scenic parts of the village. Omichi told him of her hobbies and the art she made, and Suido also told her about the poems his heads usually come up with when left alone. They both talked in understanding like two lost souls who had known themselves in their past lives. Villagers who would usually giggle behind Omichi's backs could only watch her and Suido, not uttering a word. For the next few weeks, the bond between Suido and Omichi grew, and they were always seen together. Also, Prince Ganji was always seen chased around by Abaucho. One evening, Prince Ganji told Suido to invite Omichi for an evening hangout, as all the young royalties of both kingdoms would be meeting. Omichi was reluctant at first, but Suido convinced her he would be by her side. When Suido and Omichi arrived at the party, a few glances was thrown at them, and Prince Ganji beckoned on them to join him and Abaucho, and they both walked towards Prince Ganji. They all talked about different topics, political and normal conversations, and throughout the dialogues, Omichi's wit, intelligence and sense of humor couldn't but shine through her. She and Suido chemistry was undeniable. They understood themselves like old friends, which made Abaucho jealous. Prince Ganja threw a question out to the conversation. "Let's assume a large kingdom wants to take over another kingdom without bringing war. How will you ladies handle it?" he said, pushing the question out to Omichi and Abaucho. Omichi was in silence for a while, and Abaucho looked completely ignorant and uninterested in whatever Prince Ganje was saying. Then Omichi spoke. "To take from a person without stealing, you have to offer them something bigger and make them want something you have. To take over a kingdom without war, you have to offer them something bigger, like a sit of power, in your kingdom, and when they're completely relaxed, you take what's theirs," Omichi said. Prince Ganje and Suido stood surprised and impressed, looking at Omichi, and she continued, "When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, sell it for double your price, and buy the lemon tree." Suido looked at Omichi with a proud and satisfying smile, which made Abaucho jealous, and the prince also started clapping his hands, which made everyone silent. Abaucho, feeling left out, reached to Prince Ganje. "You know, I also have a favorite quote," she said. "When life gives you lemons, squeeze it in people's eyes, but you don't even have any lemons to squeeze." Abaucho said, looking at Omichi with a smile, breaking into laughter that everyone joined in. Omichi looked at Abaucho, smiling back. "Well, there are so many eyes in this village, your lemons must be really stressed out. I hope they don't get saggy," Omichi said. A brief silence followed after, and people stared at each other's faces, trying to hold their laughter. Sweeto finally bust out laughing, which made everyone also join, laughing at Abaucho, who looked seriously pained. The royal hangout was ending and everyone started leaving, but before they left, they greeted Omichi with respect, something they had never done before. Omichi and Sweeto weren't ready to go home, so Omichi took Sweeto to one of her favorite spots in the village, the waterfall that radiated with the silver, shining bright moonlight. They both sat on the green, soft grass at the edge of the cliff and talked for hours, in a moment of silence amongst them. Sweeto looked to Omichi. "I think I really like you. Like really, really," he said, looking into Omichi's eyes, who looked back at him. "I think I really like you too," she said. And they both stared at each other's eyes, which seems to pull them closer, and they leaned forward, kissing each other. After the kiss and a few snuggles and embrace, they decided to head back to the palace. When Omichi and Sweeto got to the palace, she met fresh lemons served on the table in her room. "Oh, this must be my mum," she said, "always bringing food for me," and she stretched the lemons to Sweeto, who collected it and put it in his pocket. Unknowingly to them, it was Abaucho who put the fruit in Omichi's room. After a week of Omichi and Sweeto relationship blooming, it was now time for the prince to announce his chosen wife. Everyone gathered at the palace, Abaucho dressed in her elegant attire, and Omichi in her same casual gown standing beside Sweeto. It was obvious to everyone in the village who the bride was. It was the same Abaucho, who has always been with the prince since he arrived. As Prince Ganje was about to speak suddenly, he was interrupted by some group of warriors from his kingdom marching in. They carried a crown and blew a trumpet. "Your Majesty, your father. King Arin has succumbed to his illness and has passed away. The crown mustn't see sunset without sitting on a head." And they walked over and crowned Prince Ganje, who now has just become king. Abaucho was overjoyed. She was getting married to a king, and she already started daydreaming of her queendom, which would start in a few seconds. King Ganje then spoke. "People of Agasia, I came to your lands to find a wife, and I got a queen. I came to find a virtuous woman, and I have found one. I came to find a woman who will rule besides me and lead nations, and I have found one. Behold your queen, Queen Omichi," he said, and the entire palace fell quiet.
Yeah, you read that right. I was thrown right into a pile of trash when I was born. Probably because no one wanted me. Hey, I'm Anika, and I've got a story to tell you that starts in a small town, but certainly doesn't end there. I came into this world a bundle of joy with a shock of vibrant red hair. My arrival seemed to startle everyone. Maybe they thought I was some kind of oddity, which is why I ended up in the garbage not long after. But my story didn't end in that trash can. It was the dead of night when a nurse, drawn by my crying, found me. She was scared at first, but something changed when we locked eyes. My tears turned into laughter, and just like that, she decided I was hers to care for. This nurse, Patricia, became everything to me. She might not have had riches, but she gave me a wealth of love and care. I owe her my life. She's the reason I'm here today, telling you my story. Though she also believed my fiery red hair was a bit much and suggested I keep it hidden. Nurse Patricia always cautioned me, her voice laced with concern. "Anika, remember to always cover your hair. Never let anyone see it. It's a scary world out there. Promise me that. With the innocence of youth, I reply, I promise. When I turned 4, Patricia decided it was time for me to start school. Hoping I'd make friends and experience life beyond our home and her mother's company. The morning of my first day, she helped me into a realistic wig to conceal my red hair. Despite my nervousness, she reassured me as she dropped me off. The school was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I missed Patricia terribly, but fortunately, I didn't remain alone for long. I made some amazing friends, friendships that have stood the test of time. The teacher introduced me. We have a new student today. Her name is Annika. Please treat her kindly. I found my place among the other children, playing with toys and having a wonderful time. That moment marked the beginning of time flying by. Fast forward 12 years, and here I am in high school. Starting fresh and clean, I quickly became quite popular among my peers. Yet, despite the close bonds I formed, I've kept my secret about my hair from everyone. It's a part of who I am that I've chosen to keep hidden, adhering to Patricia's advice and my promise to her. Recalling a vivid memory from my childhood, I shared when I was 6. My wig fell off while I was playing in the playground. The kids in front of me started screaming and crying. I was so scared and didn't know what to do, but thankfully, Patricia was there to help me. That incident left a deep mark on me, and I vowed never to let it happen again. Then came a significant day in high school when a new student joined our class. His name was Aid, and he was slightly younger than the rest of us. To my astonishment, Aid had bright red hair too. It was the first time I saw someone like me who didn't have to hide their hair. My friend Emery whispered to me, "Pissed. That's the guy I was telling you about. His family is super rich. They own half of this town." I couldn't believe it, a wealthy kid with red hair who didn't need to conceal it? That was a revelation to me. I couldn't wait to tell Nurse Patricia about Aid. However, her reaction took me by surprise. "Annika, stay away from him. Don't get involved with that guy," she advised. Although shocked by her response, I didn't argue. Yet, curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to talk to him, to find out why his red hair was accepted, or perhaps celebrated, unlike mine. One sunny afternoon, as I was sitting in the school courtyard with my friends, Aid approached us. Aid paused, a slight smile curving his lips as he turned to face me. "Hey, can I join you guys?" he asked, his eyes scanning the group. Internally, I panicked. Patricia's warning echoed in my mind, urging me to maintain a distance. Yet, here he was, reaching out. Oh no, what should I do now? I thought, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Amari, ever the social butterfly, didn't hesitate. "Sure, Aid. I'm Amari. This is Annika, and these are her friends," she introduced us warmly. Swallowing my nerves, I managed a small, high Aid. To my surprise, conversation with Aid flowed effortlessly. We discovered shared interests and viewpoints that drew us closer with each passing day. As weeks melded into a fabric of friendship, Aid and I found ourselves sharing more about our lives. He spoke of his family's affluent background and their historical roots in the town, yet he never broached the topic of his distinctive red hair. An exciting opportunity came one sunny Saturday afternoon when Aid invited us to spend the day on a yacht owned by his family. The sheer size of the vessel left us all in awe, marveling at the luxury before us. While Aid mingled and fetched drinks with his friends, I saw my chance to satisfy the curiosity that had been gnawing at me. "Aid, I've always wondered about your hair. How did you get it to be so red?" I ventured, hoping my question wouldn't push him away. Aid's expression softened, and he looked into the distance for a moment before turning back to me with a sincerity in his eyes. "It's a bit of a family story," he began, signaling the start of a revelation that would perhaps bring us even closer or unveil a secret I wasn't prepared for. Aid's revelation was simple yet profound. It's a family trait. We've had red hair for generations. It's something we're proud of. I stood there, my jaw slack in astonishment. A family trait? What does he mean? The notion was alien to me. All my life, I had concealed my red hair, believing it to be an aberration, something to be ashamed of. Yet here was Aid, not just unashamed, but proud of his heritage. He then showed me a picture of a woman from his wallet, her hair a vibrant red, matching mine. This is my mom. She was the daughter of King Kyle, the IV. He didn't have any descendants other than her. Though he was known for his unique orange hair, my mom had red hair. He cherished her deeply. She was considered unique in the world with this hair color, and now it's passed down to me. His words swirled in my head. The only woman with that hair color? Could it be possible? For a moment, I was lost in thought, struggling to reconcile this new perspective with everything I had believed. Laughing lightly, I thanked Aid. Haha, Aid. Thank you for sharing this with me. I really appreciate it. I gotta go now. See you later. His story had given me much to ponder. That night, as I lay in bed, Aid's story echoed in my mind. The realization that I had been living in fear over something as natural as my hair color felt both liberating and daunting. After much deliberation, I decided to keep this conversation from Patricia, at least for now. Instead, I resolved to share my own story with Aid, given our shared trait. It felt right, acknowledging who I truly was, perhaps for the first time. The next morning, filled with a mixture of hope and anxiety, I called Aid to meet me at the park. It was there, amidst the quiet rustle of leaves and distant laughter of children, that I unveiled my secret to him. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still as he absorbed the sight of my vibrant red hair, free from its usual concealment. Annika, how do you have the same hair as me? I don't understand what's happening. Aid's confusion was palpable, his voice a mix of curiosity and shock. That's exactly what I'm trying to figure out, Aid, I responded, my heart racing. The revelation proved too much for Aid. Without another word, he turned away, leaving me alone with my unveiled truth. This is too much for me. I'll head back, he said, his departure marking a sharp pang of betrayal. I stood there, abandoned, my secret hanging heavily in the air. Returning home, I sought solace in Patricia's presence, confessing the day's events. Her reaction was one of concern, tinged with disappointment. You should have come to me first before taking such a step. It was too risky, she admonished. Days turned into a silent procession of normalcy, yet Aid's absence cast a long shadow over my daily life. He had stopped coming to school, his seat a constant reminder of our last conversation. My curiosity and worry compelled me to inquire about him, only to be met with unexpected news from Amory. Didn't you hear? Aid dropped out of our school. I heard he's not coming back, she shared, her voice low. What? Why? Was it all because of me? The questions circled in my mind, a whirlpool of doubt and regret. Aid's reaction and subsequent departure left me wondering about the fragility of connections formed under the shadow of secrets. Driven by a need for closure and understanding, I embarked on a quest to find Aid. Leveraging the small network of his acquaintances, I managed to uncover his address. Upon my arrival, the imposing gates and the stringent security initially barred my way, but I persisted, convincing them of my friendship with Aid. The door opened to reveal the woman from the photograph, Aid's mother, her presence as commanding as it was unexpected. Who are you? What do you want? She demanded, her eyes scrutinizing me. In that moment, I made a decision that felt like stripping away the last vestiges of my old self. I removed my wig, revealing my true identity. Her reaction was one of sheer shock, followed by a chilling declaration. "You were supposed to be dead. How did you get here?" Her words, heavy with implications of a dark past, sent a shiver down my spine. "I left you to die. How are you still alive?" she screamed, her face contorted with rage. The situation escalated quickly, and fearing for my safety, I fled to my car and drove away as fast as I could, leaving behind a scene that felt ripped from a nightmare. Unbeknownst to me, Aid had witnessed everything from his window, his thoughts a turmoil of betrayal and confusion. "Mom, why? Why did you hide this from us?" he muttered to himself, grappling with the revelations of the day. A few days of silence followed, a period of reflection and piecing together the fragmented pieces of my past. Then, unexpectedly, Aid reached out, proposing a meeting at a local cafe. Despite my reservations, curiosity and a yearning for answers drew me to him. As we sat across from each other, Aid, with a seriousness I had not seen before, voiced a theory that seemed as unbelievable as it was plausible. "Anika, you might find this hard to believe, but I think you're my lost sister." My initial reaction was disbelief, mixed with a touch of humor. "Haha, what?" "Aid, stop messing around." But the gravity in his gaze told me he was earnest, sparking a tumult of emotions and questions within me. Aid's words were a catalyst, turning my world on its head. "It's true. Why else would your hair match mine?" My mom's reaction? "She's hiding the truth." His earnestness pierced through the haze of my confusion. "You saw her reaction?" I asked, still reeling from the shock of his mother's accusation that I was supposed to be dead, that I was found in a trash can, discarded at the beginning of my life. Aid nodded, his expression somber. "Yes, it all adds up. You are my sister," he confirmed, his voice steady, leaving no room for doubt. But with this revelation came an avalanche of questions. Why did all this happen the way it did? "We need to find out," I voice, the need for understanding propelling us forward. With careful planning, Aid and I confronted his mother, ensuring she had no choice but to reveal the truth. Seated across from us, the weight of years and secrets seemed to burden her. "It's true, you're my daughter. But you were a mistake. There was no way you should have survived," she admitted, her words cutting deep. Yet they were tinged with a sorrow that spoke of a past filled with pain and regret. She began her story, a tale of love and betrayal that was as tragic as it was shocking. "I was 20 when I met him at work. He was wonderful, making me feel like the only girl in the world. We shared everything: laughter, tears, dreams. He loved me, or so I thought, until I became pregnant with you." Her voice faltered as she recounted the betrayal that shattered her world. "The moment I needed him most, he withdrew, and then I found him with another woman. My heart broke. How could he choose her over me?" The confession, raw and unfiltered, fell from Adi's mom's lips, revealing the depth of her bitterness and the lengths to which she had gone to erase her past. She admitted to casting me aside, a newborn, because of the hate she harbored not just for my father, but for the very essence of my existence. What she didn't know was that I had been recording our conversation, a precaution that felt necessary, given the gravity of what I hoped to uncover. The moment her admission filled the room, the police, who had been waiting on my signal, stepped in. She was arrested for child negligence and attempted murder, her actions finally catching up to her after all these years. In the wake of her arrest, the legal proceedings moved quickly, and astonishingly, I was positioned to inherit everything that was to be my brother's. But material wealth paled in comparison to the familial bonds that were being forged in the crucible of our shared ordeal. I extended an invitation to Patricia, the woman who had truly been a mother to me, to come and live with Aid and me. Her acceptance filled a void in my life I hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. Together with her boyfriend, we formed a new family unit, one built on love, acceptance, and understanding, not blood or obligation. Living together, we created a home that was brimming with laughter, warmth, and mutual support. It was a testament to the power of chosen family. And every day I was reminded of how grateful I was for this unexpected journey. Through it all, I learned the most valuable lesson of my life: the importance of being true to oneself. The shadow of the girl who was discarded in the trash faded away, replaced by Annika, a woman defined not by her past, but by her vibrant hair, indomitable spirit, and a heart that had learned to love despite the hate that sought to quench. I am Annika, I would remind myself, the girl with fiery red hair and a heart full of courage. And that was all I needed to be.
When this man's wife gave birth to a black baby, he dumped her in the most cruel way. 20 years later, something unbelievable happened. Now go to the story. Adan shook in fear as Emeka walked menacingly towards her. She tightened her hold around the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Tears streamed down her face as dread filled the pit of her belly. "Who's the father of that bastard?" Emeka bellowed as he drew closer, his eyeballs blazing with fury. For fear of his anger, Adan only whimpered and didn't utter a thing. "Answer me," he roared, this time hitting his fists on the wall where she rested. Her fears heightened, causing her to jerk as she shivered. Emeka groaned in anger, holding his fists tightly as he shot daggers at her with his eyes. Without another word, he stormed out of the hospital room. Tears rolled down Adan's eyes as she watched her husband leave. She took another look at the beautiful baby boy sleeping calmly in her arms. She took pity on him as she felt he didn't deserve to be welcomed in such a manner. Still, she couldn't fathom how the baby came out as black. She and Emeka were albinos, although the medical doctor gave an explanation for this, revealing how very common it is for them to have normal children. Emeka was not having it. "My parents, 3 brothers and only sister are albinos. Your both parents are albinos. Even your only sister. Where on earth did that child come out from? You must have been cheating." The doctor, seeing Emeka's stubbornness, suggested a DNA test. With this, they would be able to come up with the much-needed answers. 5 days later, Adan was discharged from the hospital. Throughout her stay at the hospital, Emeka never called or came around to check on her, and Adan was more than disappointed in Emeka. What happened to all the vows they had made to be there for each other, no matter what? Still, she understood his anger. If she were in his shoes, she would have been angry too. But abandoning her at the hospital was just too much. It meant he had lost trust in her completely. Even if he entertained doubts about the child being his, they could go far as a DNA test. It was much better than doubting her completely on a thought. When she finally got home, she met Emeka, who immediately gave her a cold, bloody look as their eyes locked. Without a word, he walked into the guest room. Adan sighed and entered their room a few minutes later, after she had fed her baby and made sure he was fast asleep. She decided to confront her husband. Emeka looked up in shock when Adan entered the guest room. "What do you want?" he bellowed, angry that she even had the guts to walk into his room. Adan remained silent until she had gotten close enough. She then began to remind him of their earlier days and the vows they had made to each other. She asked him why he would entertain this much doubt and abandon her at the hospital. Why would he think she would at any time be disloyal to the relationship they shared? She then swore that she had never entertained the thought of cheating on him, let alone actually do it. She even suggested they go for a DNA test if he still doubted her. Tears streamed her eyes as she spoke and pleaded, but all Emeka did was throw her dirty looks. When it seemed she was done, Emeka let out a sarcastic laugh. He then said he would not waste his money on a DNA test, proving the obvious that she had been unfaithful to him. He told her to leave with her bastard and go meet her lover, or else he would make the house unbearable for her and the baby. Then he pushed her out of the room and ordered her to just pack her things and leave, or he would force her to do so. Afterward, he shut the door in her face. Adan sat by the door and wept bitterly. She continued to bang on the door, begging Emeka to believe her, but he remained deaf to her pleas. The only time he responded was to tell her to leave his place and begin packing her things, or he would do something she would regret. When she got exhausted from pleading and arguing with a rock, she got up and went to her room. She decided to give him some space. She understood Emeka's anger was bad. She didn't want to be a victim of it. Probably he needed more space and time to think through. She decided to give him that. She then called her sister and explained everything to her. That night, her sister drove down to Adan's apartment and helped her pack a few things and some of the baby's. As Adan entered the car with her baby, she looked behind, hoping Emeka would come around, but of course, no one was in sight. Her sister tried to calm her, telling her it would be fine. A few days later, Adan woke up to discover that all the money in the joint account she shared with Emeka had been cleared. She was stunned. Her heart raced and tears streamed down her face as she kept checking the balance. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. This time around, she damned the consequences and decided to confront Emeka. This was madness. She quickly got dressed and headed down to their matrimonial home. But on getting there, she realized something even worse had happened. The house was empty. All of Emeka's things and all of hers were gone. As if that wasn't enough, all the baby's stuff was gone too. Why was Emeka doing this? She kept pondering. Why would he hurt her this much for an accusation he wasn't willing to prove? Did he just enjoy hurting her? Hours went by before Adan eventually got up, wiping her tears. When she saw a piece of paper by the wall, it was a note written by Emeka. She could feel her heart almost popping out of her chest as she read the last words he wrote to her. Adan's eyeballs widened as she read through the note, and when the realization of what this meant hit her, she screamed and burst into tears as she fell onto the ground. She cried and wailed. She tried calling him, but of course his line was switched off. She guessed he had blocked her number. She then called her sister and cried bitterly, narrating what she met at home. Her sister, who was at work, had to make an excuse to attend to her. 2 weeks later, Emeka's lawyers came around and handed her the divorce papers to sign. She was quite exhausted from crying, and any efforts to save her marriage were more or less a waste of time. She just signed the papers without arguments. The pain was unbearable. She had lost strength from crying, and she was agonizingly bitter. Her sister kept cheering her up, telling her that Emeka never deserved her in the first place, that he was gone for good. But nothing her sister did was able to soothe the pain. It was only able to help her stay strong, but she was grateful for her sister. She was always there to cheer and help with the baby. She had also kept her from going into depression. Despite the unforeseen circumstances his birth seemed to have brought, Adan never blamed her baby for her misfortunes. Each time she looked at him, she was grateful to God for the gift of life. She felt nothing but love for her baby and named him Uche. She was determined to raise him with all the love in her heart, counting him innocent of the trauma she was going through. Her maternal leave came to an end, and she had to resume work. She took Uche to daycare in the morning before driving down to work, but due to the agony she was going through, she became less efficient at work. She worked in customer service at a microfinance bank. Tasks that seemed easier for her initially felt tougher to run smoothly. The once smiling and bubbling young Adan became moody and reserved, appearing a bit shabby. A few weeks later, her supervisor, Peter Obi, called her. He began asking her what the matter was, as she was no longer the employee he had come to know and appreciate. At first, she claimed nothing was wrong and apologized for her recent shortcomings. As he persisted, she claimed it was probably because she had just rounded her maternal leave. It was later she broke into tears and related to her boss the current state of her marriage due to the birth of her baby. Peter felt sorry for her. He calmed her and encouraged her to remain strong. He told her that it would all make sense in the end. He then embraced her and let her cry on his chest as he patted her back. She was one of his favorite subordinates due to her work ethics and her personality as a whole. It felt unfair to him that someone as grateful as she would be going through this. He then decided to help her heal. Every break period, Peter would go out with her. Initially, she was hesitant, but his persistence eventually led her to join him for lunch. Over time, this routine helped build an acquaintance between them. During the weekends, Peter also came around to see her and the baby and asked how they were doing. Sometimes, if he had time on his hands, he would take them out to either see a movie or to enjoy a park or a beach or to a nice restaurant. Sometimes, he just drove them around to see and enjoy nature, knowing Adan barely came out after work hours as she would wallow in sorrow. After a few months, Adan did begin to heal. She gradually returned to the cheerful lady she had always been at work. She was most grateful to her boss for helping her get over the hurts her past marriage brought. Peter was happy for her healing and still kept coming around to check on her progress. It had become kind of a routine between the two of them, and it just went on naturally. A year later, feelings began to spark. Peter was a widower. His wife had died during childbirth, and the baby was stillborn, bringing double tragedy for Peter. Maybe that's why he had emphasized so easily with Adan's pain. He had been broken beyond words, and it had taken him a year to properly heal. But he had never felt the need to move on, and now he realized he felt something he had never expected to feel, and had even given up or ever feeling again. He had honestly started his relationship with Adan on a very platonic note. He had only wanted to help her heal, but now he felt she was more than a friend to him. He wanted more than just friendship. So, on one weekend, he asked if they could take their relationship to another level as he expressed his feelings for her. Adan was surprised. She, too, was beginning to admire him beyond their working relationship and friendship, but she didn't expect he would feel the same. Unfortunately, although she had healed from the trauma of Emeka's betrayal, she still loved him. So, she couldn't love someone else as she could him. She politely declined Peter's request, hurting him deeply. Still, Peter didn't give up. He remained there for her and kept showing her how much he cared for her. Adan appreciated his kindness and care, and they remained friends. One day, she was cooking in the kitchen when she heard Uche scream from the living room. Alarmed, she decided to rush to know what was wrong and didn't pay attention to her surroundings. She hit the pot containing the hot sauce she was stirring while trying to run out, and it came tumbling down and poured all over her legs. She screamed in pain as the heat burned her flesh. Uche rushed to the kitchen instead and began crying again when he saw his mom crying in pain. He was too young to know what to do, and the only way he could express his confusion was by crying. Adan knew she had to be strong for herself and her son. Despite the pain, she got up and walked to her phone while patting her son. Her sister was away on a business trip at the time. The only person she could call was Peter. She called him to ask him if he could help her to get to the hospital. He immediately agreed and got into his car. While waiting for Peter, she applied first aid on the wound. When they got to the hospital, she was admitted for proper treatment. Adan was scared about the welfare of her son. Her sister was away, and she had no one who would willingly look after Uche. But even without asking or expressing her worries, Peter told her he would look after Uche while she was at the hospital. Adan couldn't express her gratitude enough. She was too grateful for his kindness and thoughtfulness. Peter acted like a loving father to Uche. He looked after him with so much love and patience. He made sure to meet his needs and ensured the boy was okay. And while returning from work after picking Uche up from the daycare, he would drive them both down to see how Adan was faring at the hospital. When they came around, Adan could see how happy Uche was with Peter. She was skeptical about him staying with Peter, thinking he would be uncomfortable, as he had never been alone with anyone else besides her sister. But she was shocked to see how Peter and Uche flowed seamlessly. She even heard Uche refer to him as Papa, rather than the usual Uncle Peter he called him. A week later, she was discharged, and Peter drove her home. He then ordered that she rested at home for a few days before she resumed work. Adan spent those few days at home to reflect on the bond between her and her boss. She was convinced he loved her and her son. She too could no longer deny the fact that she had fallen in love with him. She had made a decision. She decided to move on. Even Uche loved him, and she knew he would be a great father to Uche. More so, Uche needed a father figure in his life. No one else wore that shoe better than Peter. When she went back to work, she entered his office to thank him for his kindness and help when she needed it the most, which he gracefully accepted. She then told him that she loved them and would like to take their relationship to a deeper level. Peter was so happy to hear this that he immediately pulled her into a warm embrace and kissed her. Peter never ceased to show Adan with love. Soon, her fellow colleagues knew there was something going on between the boss and her. This earned the jealousy of some and admiration of others, but Adan never let it get to her head, and she never let it affect her work. She still remained the cheerful and efficient lady they had known her to be, and Peter just kept loving her more and more. 2 years later, Peter knew he had to settle down with Adan. So, on her birthday that year, as she entered the office, she was shocked to see the entrance was decorated with balloons and flowers. As she entered inside, she heard the happy birthday shout from her colleagues. She was shocked and looked around in amusement as her hands covered her mouth. She then gave a hearty laugh to fight the tears that threatened to fall. This was too beautiful. She began to thank everyone for the efforts they made in doing this for her. But in the midst of the crowd, she searched for Peter, but didn't find him. She suspected he was the mastermind behind this. But where was he? Happy birthday, she heard his calm voice from behind her. As she turned around, Peter was standing behind her with a wide smile and a cake in his hands. Both her hands were on her lips, covering her mouth as tears began running. His smile widened, and he urged her to come closer to him to give him a side hug because of the cake he was holding. She whispered, "Thank you," and he pecked her lips. When it was time to cut the cake, Adan slid the knife through the cake, but realized there was something hard. She became curious and decided to cut the cake open. When she did that, she found a golden ring. And when she picked it up and turned back, she met Peter already down on one knee. She gasped in shock. "I love you, Adan, and I don't think I can do life without you. I also want to be a father to Uche, so please, will you marry me?" Peter asked so lovingly that tears ran down Adan's cheeks as she nodded. He then collected a ring from her hand and slid it onto her finger. He got up and kissed her while the cheerful onlookers watched on with admiration. She had tears streaming down their faces too. 3 months later, they got married. As the years passed by, the couple groomed Uche to be a responsible child. They made sure Uche got the best of everything: school, clothes, and education. Uche made them proud with his exceptional intelligence. In due time, he graduated high school, got into college, and studied computer science. Upon graduation, he was immediately employed in a tech company. His employment came with privileges like a house and the car with a hefty offer. His parents couldn't be any happier, especially Adan. Everything was going fine for this family until someone they never thought they would ever see showed up in their lives. That day, the family was having a small outdoor gathering to celebrate Uche's birthday when a strange man suddenly showed up. The old man looked shabby and rough. He also exuded a foul stench, and Uche felt nothing but sympathy for him. Uche was about to offer the man a drink when Adan stopped him. "That's the man who abandoned you," she said, ever so coldly. Hearing those words, Uche went into a rage and ordered Emeka to leave at once. Shamelessly, Emeka went on his one knee and begged for listening ears. Through tears, he narrated how his mother had reached out to him about 10 years ago. She had confessed that his biological father, the man whom she had cheated with shortly after getting married to the man he believed was his dad. "So why did you come back? You knew 10 years ago. What took you so long?" Uche screamed. Emeka had no sensible answer. He had actually gotten carried away with living a life without responsibility. After he dumped Adan, he lived his life carelessly. He went from party to party, dated several women, and spent lavishly. Eventually, he settled with a younger girl only 5 years ago, and that marked the beginning of his misery. She made his life a living hell. She never truly loved him and was only with him for his money. As a result of his marital problems, Emeka could no longer focus at work, and he got laid off. Just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, his young lover fled. That day, he had gone out to take a bottle or two. Whenever he went out that way, he would stay away for several hours just to escape the wrath of his girlfriend. When he eventually returned home that day, he got the shock of his life. Every single thing he owned was gone. Worse off, he began getting debit alerts on his phone until almost nothing was left. Overwhelmed with shock, Emeka suffered a stroke. Fortunately for him, his neighbor came to his aid, and he was taken to the hospital, where he eventually recovered. As soon as he got discharged, Emeka knew he had to look for his original family. Being treated in such a way made him realize how badly he had treated Adan and his son. He had heard that Adan had remarried, but still believed he stood a chance. After all, she had been madly in love with him back then. How wrong he was. Adan told him that he got no place in their lives and that she revoked his paternity rights years ago. Together, mother and son then screamed at him to leave and never show his face again. Emeka walked away in shame. He later ended up in an old people's home, wishing he could turn back the hands of time and act right. What do you think about what eventually happened to Emeka? Share your thoughts in the comments section. If you liked the story, surely the next video that's appearing on your screen will move you too. A huge kiss, and see you in the next story.